People, hello, how are we? Hopefully we're all doing well. I'm Tom, yet another new background. I've chucked in a fish lamp, thought why not? Hope you don't mind. Beterbiev takes on Bivol this weekend. We have 23-0 with 12 KOs, takes on 20-0 with 20 KOs. What an exciting fight. And it would be remiss of me not to mention right off the bat the first cancelled fight. I don't know why, but every other build-up to this I've seen, whether it be YouTubers, media, the fighters, they haven't mentioned the fact the first fight was cancelled. And I think partly because the first fight was slightly overshadowed by the 5 versus 5. This is a colossal fight, but because of the characters in the fight and the nature of the lack of build-up for the first fight, I suppose, it was kind of overshadowed by the 5v5. So when they pulled out, it didn't make a huge difference to that card. And no one's been mentioning the fact that actually there was a first fight. They were supposed to fight, but the date got cancelled, and here we are. They've rearranged it, and that's got to be worth a mention. I mean, we'll talk more about that later, but I wanted to bring that up. Also, just quickly, in the first fight, the one that got cancelled, I picked Bivol to win. I've always thought Bivol outboxes. Typically, a good boxer will outbox a heavy puncher. Typically, you get freaks of that. Someone like Deontay Wilder, who can just knock out anybody, obviously got a long way before he got outboxed. Eventually Fury did get to him, but that's different. It's Fury. Again, a very good boxer will be a hard puncher. Again, somebody like Daniel Dubois, a very hard puncher. Someone like Usyk, a very good boxer. The boxer will win. The boxer will beat the hard puncher 9 times out of 10. You obviously get lucky punches. What makes this so difficult is Beterbiev isn't just a hard puncher. Beterbiev is also a very good boxer. I just think Bivol's better. I think the way Bivol uses his movement is second to none. Second to none. The only time we've ever seen him hurt was against Joe Smith Jr. He's not bad himself. And it was a punch that was on the bell, should we say, on the bell. So I've always fancied him to outbox Beterbiev, but I also do think Beterbiev's style is like the kryptonite for the Soviet style. The way Beterbiev boxes, I think probably because he grew up in Russia fighting against the Soviet style 9 times out of 10, that's the kryptonite to the Soviet style. I think that's kind of what he's mastered his craft around, and that's what Bivol does to perfection. He is the perfect Soviet boxer. That's why I've always thought it's so 50-50, because I do fancy Bivol, but actually the kryptonite of his style is Beterbiev. But when you see somebody who's just so good at it, sometimes no matter how styles make fights, sometimes no, just the better boxer wins. Sometimes that's what it's like. We've seen Usyk have a very tough fight against Beterbiev, but ultimately Usyk, who's got a Soviet style, beat Beterbiev because sometimes the better boxer just wins. With that out of the way, let's dive more into this specific fight. So just to gloss over it again very quickly, very briefly. The first fight was cancelled. It was cancelled because Beterbiev injured his knee so bad to the point he actually needed knee surgery. Now, knee surgery at 39 years old, right before you're about to fight the fighter with perhaps the best movement in all of boxing. You know what I mean? 39 years old he is, having knee surgery, and then going in there against perhaps the best mover in boxing. Whilst I still think it's a 50-50 fight, I do, you've got to take that into account. You have to bear that in mind. And ultimately, whilst I don't think that's going to play too much effect in the fight, I do think it's perhaps a little bit too early for Beterbiev. I think if Beterbiev had his way, he'd probably fight a little bit later down the road and maybe get another warm-up fight to get back into it. But ultimately, like I say, when the Saudis give you a date, they give you a date. You're fighting. It's the same reason I think the AJ versus Dubois rematch will happen in February. Most people will probably think that's a touch too early for AJ. Not Dubois, he's fine. But AJ, when you're beaten up like that, you need a bit of time out. I think that's probably a little bit too early for him. But when the Saudis say, this is the date you're fighting, you take the money and you fight on that date. But I do think Beterbiev will probably be thinking to himself, this is a bit earlier than I'd like. The point I'm getting at is when you're about to fight probably the best mover in boxing, who's regularly described as poetry in motion, whose only real criticism is the fact he doesn't KO people, but is now coming off the back of a KO because you dropped out the fight and someone stepped in, he KO'd him. And you're coming off the back of a knee injury that was so severe you needed surgery, I don't think you're going to want, and then, I don't think we're going to get rushed back into a fight at 39 years old against that guy. I just think it's worth a mention, but look, I don't think it will play too much effect on the fight. If we want to start bring up excuses and making issues, we could also say that Bivol obviously has a lot going on outside the ring with his ex-wife. So they both have issues going on. It's still a 50-50 fight. I don't think that'll actually play too much role on the fight unless Beterbiev does his knee again. So that's mentioned. Let's get into it. The truth of this fight is that people either see one of two outcomes. People either see a Beterbiev knockout or a Bivol win on points. And whilst I agree, that's definitely the most likely of the two outcomes, it's certainly not the only two outcomes. Beterbiev is a very good boxer, perhaps even underrated, as we've just never seen it have to go to the judges. If he's able to hurt Bivol, to stop him moving around like he normally does, we could definitely see him nick some of these early rounds, or any of the rounds really. If you throw in a couple of, like a knockdown or two as well, which you see, like I say, we've seen Bivol hurt against Joe Smith Jr. If Beterbiev's able to land like that, you're probably going down. Suddenly, Beterbiev can win on points. Equally, if Bivol really starts to go through the motions like we know he can, we've seen Beterbiev hurt. And if he's able to clip Beterbiev time and time again with his boxing skills and he can't recover, suddenly we will see Bivol with a stoppage. Although, like I say, I must admit, Beterbiev on points is more likely to win, is more likely an outcome than Bivol stopping him. That said, I'm also in the camp that, like most people, that it's either going to be Bivol on points or Beterbiev stoppage. So enough yapping about this fight. Let's talk about my actual predictions. I've always liked Bivol. I've been admiring him for a very long time, and I'm one of the few people that actually picked him to beat Canelo Alvarez. Like I said, I've mentioned it time and time again. I remember getting an argument with a few of my colleagues back when I worked at Nando's about the result of that fight. And I picked Bivol to outbox Canelo. I just think when Bivol goes through those gears, no one's touching him. He's absolutely incredible. So I thought he would beat, your Canelo Alvarez. This really hasn't changed. I'm not taking, if anything, I'm actually thinking more like Beterbiev's going to win now. And initially I was thinking, yeah, Bivol's going to win. Going into the first fight, quite confident about it. He got injured and postponed, and you would think, as I said all that about the injury, I'd actually be leaning more towards Bivol, but I'm not. For some reason, that Beterbiev knockout is getting more and more, it's creeping in, and it's springing some more doubt on my mind. I just think, as the fight got closer, the more and more I thought about it, the more I gave Beterbiev a chance to get to him. And he's got 12 rounds to land that punch. And he is a good boxer too. I just started to see him being able to get to Bivol. And the same can be said now. But honestly, I think that's almost like, kind of like nerves, doubts, and second guessing myself as the fight's getting closer, especially after my prediction of the AJ Dubois fight. We saw how that went. I will say that if there was ever a fight that I was going to predict a draw, it would be this. The only other fight I can think of where I was this unsure was Ruiz versus Miller. If you go back and watch my prediction, I was saying how I was going to go Ruiz because my head was saying Ruiz and everyone else was saying Ruiz. But every part of my body, everything else was saying to go for Miller. For some reason I didn't. And that's something where I was quite unsure and perhaps could have gone for a draw. Looking back now, like I say, that should have told me it was going to be a draw, and it was. Other than that, funnily enough, the only other closest fight is also on this card, actually. Fabio Wardley versus Fraser Clark 2. Like I say, it's on the undercard. I could also see that being a draw again. So, for my official prediction, I am going Dmitry Bivol to win on points. I think we're going to see a fast start from Dmitry Bivol, taking those early rounds, winning, outboxing him, just that poetry in motion really coming out. I think he will thrive under it. Then I can see Beterbiev making Bivol respect that power. Landing a couple of good shots, Bivol going, okay, you can whack, I need to respect this. Backing off a bit, Beterbiev clawing back a few of these rounds, but ultimately I think at his age, just after knee surgery, I don't think he's going to quite have it in him to be able to claw back enough rounds or get enough knockdowns or whatever it is to be able to get the draw or a win. So I do think Bivol's going to do enough early on, maybe, have the first half of the fight, nick a couple in the second half, enough to get the win. That's how I see it going, people. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I'm really excited for this one. Hopefully you are too. I'm going to do a live watch along, just briefly thought I'd mention that. I'm going to do a live watch along for the whole card, probably a 2 to 4 hour stream. Come down, say hello. Looking forward to it, people. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. You know how YouTube works, people. Peace.